Hey guys, welcome to U.S. History with Lennox. I am Lennox, and today we are diving into Unit 4. Unit 4 covers 1800 to 1848, and we're specifically talking about topic 4.2, the rise of political parties in the Jeffersonian era. What we're specifically going to dive into is the causes and the effects of policy debates in the early American Republic. The driving force behind all of this is going to be the rise of political parties in the United States. If you think back to the last unit, Washington during his administration is going to deal with conflicts that exist between members of his cabinet, specifically Hamilton and Jefferson. Hamilton is going to be a supporter of the Federalist platform. Now, this platform supported a strong central government and an economy based on manufacturing. On the other side is going to be Jefferson. The Democratic-Republicans supported a weaker, smaller central government, and they believed the economy of America should be built through agriculture, specifically yeoman farmers. They're conflicting during Washington's era. That conflict is going to continue into the early 1800s. Let's start with the election of 1800. Many refer to this election as the Revolution of 1800 because what we see in this election is the defeat of the Federalist candidate, John Adams, by the Democratic-Republican Jefferson. And for one of the few times in world history, we are going to see the peaceful transfer of power from one political ideology to another. It was rare during this time, and that's why Jefferson did refer to this as a revolution. Now, as Jefferson comes into office, he's going to be tasked with bringing in the Democratic-Republican ideals with regards to the power of the federal government along with our relationship with European powers. Now, domestically, he's going to take several steps to limit the power of government. The very first thing he is going to do is he's going to abolish the whiskey tax, the tax that was put in place by Secretary of Treasury Alexander Hamilton during Washington's administration. Jefferson never liked that tax, and so he and Congress abolish it right away. The very next thing he's going to do is minimize the role of the military in our country, essentially cut back the size of the military. The military represented federal power, and remember, the Democratic Republicans wanted to limit or reduce the power of the central government. So Jefferson is resting on his ideals of a small government, limited federal power, and essentially, things are going pretty good until about 1803. In 1803, Jefferson's ideals are going to be tested by a little bitty land purchase. It all started with the Mississippi River. We know that the Mississippi was a vital part of American trade, and access to that river was crucial. Well, what's going to happen is France is going to take control of New Orleans, the port that enters into the Mississippi, and Jefferson sees an opportunity to perhaps reach a negotiation with France for unlimited access to the river. See, the Haitian Revolution had just occurred and France had lost, kind of limiting their access to North America. So what Jefferson did is he's going to send James Monroe with a check for $2 million to France. Monroe's job? Buy access to New Orleans. Well, it all sounded really good until Monroe got there, and the French made him an offer that was very difficult to refuse. Instead of buying New Orleans for $2 million, why don't you buy all the land we hold in North America for $15 million? Now, I'll do the math really quick for you. That was about 3 cents an acre. Monroe, even though he had no access to President Jefferson and no way to get approval, he knew a good deal when he saw it, jumped on the deal, and made the Louisiana Purchase. Now, Jefferson, you might think, would have been really happy about this purchase. I mean, Monroe essentially just doubled the size of the United States. But Jefferson had some concerns. I mean, first of all, was this an overreach of federal power? And if so, gosh, that kind of goes against everything he stood for. And second, he has to deal with the fact that he is a strict constructionist of the Constitution, meaning if it doesn't say it in the Constitution, he does not have that power. And there is nothing in the Constitution about buying land. Well, in the end, Jefferson's going to get on board, and the way he's going to sell it is that this purchase could be justified due to the fact that it's going to move Native Americans further west, and it's going to curtail or limit European influence in North America. The next thing that happens with regards to this purchase is Congress is going to approve a budget for the exploration of all this new land. Lewis and Clark and their Corps of Discovery are going to set out and follow the Missouri River throughout the northern half of the Louisiana Purchase. Another explorer by the name of Zebulon Pike is going to explore the southern half. The Lewis and Clark expedition is going to be very fruitful as they're going to provide much more detailed maps of the area, new scientific knowledge about the nature and the animals in that area, as well as the fact that they built diplomatic relationships with the Native Americans in the western half of the country. So this worked out to be a pretty good thing for Jefferson, even if it didn't line up with his political values exactly. The next person we want to talk about during this era is John Marshall. John Marshall is going to play a huge role in early American history, as well as the power of the federal government. John Marshall was the third Supreme Court Chief Justice, and he is going to make a monumental decision in the case of Marbury v. Madison. Let me give you a little bit of background first. Towards the end of John Adams' presidency, it was clear that the Democratic Republicans were essentially gaining a majority control of government. Not wanting to let that completely happen, Congress and the president are going to pass the Judiciary Act. In that act, 16 new courts were created, and Adams was tasked with appointing new justices to those courts. They're referred to as the midnight judges because Adams was literally making these appointments as he was leaving the office of the presidency. Well, when James Madison, the new Secretary of State, came into office, he refused to deliver those appointments. And one of those judges, William Marbury, demanded that he be given his job. He is going to sue Madison and the federal government for his job on the grounds of the Judiciary Act. The case will come before John Marshall and his Supreme Court. Now, when it came time for the ruling, everyone expected Marshall to go one way because he was a Federalist. And he didn't surprise anybody at the beginning because he said, yeah, based on this, Marbury should get his job. But, and this is going to be a big but, he declared that the Judiciary Act was actually unconstitutional. Therefore, Marbury doesn't get his job because the law has been thrown out. But even more important, Marshall said that it is the role of the Supreme Court to determine the constitutionality of laws in our country. It's a process called judicial review, and that is a term you absolutely have to know. What judicial review did was increase the power of the federal government through the courts. Another case that plays a big role in the power of the federal government that Marshall will hear is McCulloch versus Maryland. In this case, Maryland is going to sue the Bank of the United States for unpaid taxes. When it goes before Marshall, he is going to rule that states do not have the power to tax a federal entity. But even more, he is going to say that when state law and federal law are in conflict with one another, federal law trumps state law. And we refer to that as the supremacy of federal law. Both of these cases, Marbury v. Madison and McCulloch versus Maryland, increase the power of the federal government. In fact, most of Marshall's decisions did increase the power of the federal government. The next thing we need to talk about with regards to federal power in the early 1800s is our relationship with foreign countries. The very first thing we had to deal with was a bunch of pirates. Our trade vessels were traveling into the Mediterranean Sea, and there they are dealing with pirates coming from the Barbary coast of Africa. Well, what previous presidents had done in the past was pay tribute to those countries that were on the northern coast of Africa. And that tribute allowed those countries to hold back the pirates and allowed our trade vessels to travel freely. Well, during Jefferson's presidency, Tripoli, one of those countries, is going to demand a higher payment. And Jefferson says, no. When that happens, Tripoli releases the pirates. And we have field days with American vessels being boarded and our trade goods being stolen all the time. Jefferson's going to have to send the U.S. Navy into the Mediterranean, and we're going to be involved in an undeclared war, but the Barbary Pirate War, for about 4 years. It finally comes to an end when we negotiate a lower tribute to the country of Tripoli. The other major foreign policy that we're going to have to deal with actually kind of ramps up during Jefferson's presidency, but kicks in during the next presidency, that of James Madison. And it's the War of 1812. We're having some problems with England during this time. One of the first things they're doing is they are impressing our sailors into the British Navy, which essentially means they're kidnapping American sailors and forcing them to serve in the British Navy. This has been going on for some time. In fact, it started during the colonial days. And the colonists weren't very happy about it, but in all honesty, they were British citizens, and if the British government wants to force them to serve in the military, I guess they have the grounds to do that. The problem is now, they're not British citizens. They're American citizens. And the British are practicing the same thing. This is a major cause for concern, and it's making Americans very angry. At the same time, on the western frontier, American citizens who are traveling west are having trouble with Native Americans who are attacking them. And we come to find out that they're attacking them with weapons that have been supplied to them by the British, who are still in their forts on the western frontier. They still haven't left. Now, even though they didn't give them a lot of weapons, I guess one weapon was one too many. And you're going to have a young generation, a new generation in Congress that starts pushing for war with England. They're in the House of Representatives, and their nickname is the Warhawks. And it includes people like Henry Clay and John C. Calhoun. And they want to get retribution from England. So war will be declared. The Federalists oppose the war. They actually hold a convention in Hartford and threaten secession unless we pull out of the war. Well, before their threats can actually be hashed out, the war ends. It ends in a tie, but we claim it's a victory. And with an American victory, you see this huge wave of nationalism take over our country. And then all of a sudden you hear about the Federalists who want to secede. Well, that doesn't line up with the party we're having right now. So when you talk about the effects of the War of 1812, well, number one, huge nationalism. We have an American identity, but we also see the demise of the Federalist Party. So that's it. That's topic 4.2. If you have any questions, you know you can post them in the comments below. Otherwise, we will see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.